Time is a great architect, but also a ruthless destroyer. On these red-dusted plains, the name Leo was once a legend, a presence felt in every gust of wind and every thicket of brush. For 10 long years, Leo was more than just a lion. He was the heartbeat of the entire valley. His roar was not merely a sound. It was the law, an invisible boundary that no predator dared to cross. But nature follows a cruel decree. It never favors the aged. Under the sallow twilight of the savannah, the former king now appears as a ghost of his past. The camera zooms into his clouded amber eyes, once filled with fiery authority, now holding only exhaustion. Leo walks with a heavy limp, the jagged scars on his back serving as chapters in a tragic novel. He hobbles toward a drying waterhole in search of life, but only shadows await him. 12 hyenas are stationed in the tall grass. Their haunting, giggling cackle rises, signaling a bitter truth. For the first time in a decade, the king is no longer the hunter. He has become the prey. The laughter of hyenas is unlike any other sound on the steppe. It is a chaotic cacophony, both mocking and bloodthirsty. They do not strike immediately. With the instinct of opportunists, the pack circles, gradually closing the distance. They test Leo's patience by lunging in and retreating, targeting his crippled leg. Leo struggles to stand firm on the cracked mud. He stretches his neck, attempting one final roar to assert his dominance. But the sound that emerges is hoarse and broken, the sputtering breath of an engine long since worn out. Not far away, dust billows beneath the wheels of an old Jeep. Elias, a ranger with graying hair, grips the steering wheel tight. Through his binoculars, he watches the scene in silence. Elias knows Leo well. He remembers clearly 10 years ago, when Leo was a proud cub, and later, the fierce warrior who led his pride through a catastrophic wildfire to safety. In Elias's mind, Leo is not just an animal to be conserved. He is the embodiment of a fading wild era, an ancient soul carrying values of honor and resilience. The rules of the national park are clear: do not interfere with the natural cycle. It is a harsh rule meant to maintain ecological balance. But as Elias looks deeper through the lens, he sees Leo sink to one knee. The matriarch of the pack, a large female with cunning eyes, finds an opening and tears into Leo's hindquarters. Blood begins to stain his tattered mane. It is the moment of choice. Elias knows that if he does not act, this king will be torn apart in agony and humiliation by rivals who were never his equal. He looks into Leo's eyes through the lens. Those eyes do not beg for life, but they hold an utter, profound loneliness. Elias sighs, a breath of determination. He cannot stand by and watch a legend end this way. Not today, old friend, he whispers. Elias hits the gas, and the engine roars like a challenge to the hyenas, shattering the deadly silence of the evening. He knows he is breaking the rules, but sometimes, compassion is more important than dry ink on a page. Elias's Jeep charges into the center of the waterhole like an arrow piercing the fog of dust. He does not use a gun, for he understands that violence is not the solution to this imbalance. Instead, he uses the massive size of the vehicle and a blaring horn to create chaos. The hyenas, drunk on the scent of blood, recoil in surprise. Elias quickly jumps out, an extremely dangerous move in this territory. He brandishes a large trampoline mat and shouts, using human intimidation to drive back the snarling scavengers. Once the pack retreats into the shadows of the nearby bushes, Elias approaches Leo. The old king has fainted from blood loss and exhaustion. With expert precision, Elias uses a mild sedative to keep Leo still, then employs an electric winch and a makeshift sled to pull the lion's heavy frame into the back of the truck. Sweat pours down the ranger and Apos' forehead. Every passing second is as precious as gold. But just as he closes the tailgate and turns the ignition to head for the rescue center, a hollow sound rings out. Click. The Jeep shudders and dies. The pungent smell of gasoline fills the air. Elias realizes with horror that a sharp rock had severed the fuel line when he sped into the hole. The world suddenly turns terrifyingly quiet. From the darkness, 12 pairs of glowing green eyes emerge. The hyenas are back, and this time, they know the interloper is also in danger. Elias takes a deep breath to stay calm. He cannot sit and wait for death. With a flashlight tucked into his collar, he crawls under the vehicle, his hands trembling as he opens a first aid kit. He finds a small rubber tourniquet tube and heavy-duty tape. The growls of the hyenas are less than 5 meters away. Working with intense focus, Elias connects the rubber tube to the broken fuel line, wrapping it in layers of tape. His heart pounds against his ribs as he climbs back into the cabin. He turns the key. The engine sputters once, twice, then suddenly roars to life. The headlights sweep across the hyenas, blinding them and sending them scattering. Elias hits the gas, carrying the wounded king away from the death zone just in time. Leo was brought to the rescue center in critical condition. The first few weeks were a true battle between life and death. Elias rarely left the veterinary station. He worked alongside doctors to change bandages, inject antibiotics, and monitor the old king's faint breaths. The wounds from the hyenas eventually closed, but something inside Leo seemed to have shattered. As the physical pain faded, it was replaced by a haunting silence. Elias realized that the psychological scar was the hardest to heal. Leo no longer roared. He lay motionless in the corner of his enclosure, eyes staring vacantly at the iron bars. He refused food, ignoring even the freshest cuts of meat. For a creature that had spent a lifetime dominating infinite freedom, being surrounded by walls, even for protection, felt like an insult. Leo had lost his identity. He was no longer the hunter, no longer the king, but merely an aged refugee waiting for the end. Elias understood that pain. Every afternoon after his patrol, he didn't go home. Instead, he pulled up a wooden chair outside Leo and Apos' fence. He didn't try to coax or touch the lion. He just sat there, sometimes reading aloud from a book, sometimes just watching the horizon turn crimson in silence. Elias shared stories of the world outside, telling him how the valley still remembered his roar. Elias's patient presence acted as an anchor, keeping Leo's soul from drifting away into the darkness of depression. The turning point came on a night of the crescent moon. A pride of young lions in a neighboring reserve began to call out, arrogant roars of youth echoing through the wilderness. Elias saw Leo's ears twitch. The old king slowly stood up. His crippled legs still made him lean, but his gaze had changed. Leo walked to the fence, stretched his neck, and emitted a deep, guttural sound from his chest. It wasn't Apos, the defiant roar of a warrior, but the response of one who had tasted all of life and Apos' ups and downs. He accepted that he could no longer chase antelope, but he was still here, vibrant and full of dignity. Elias smiled in the dark. He knew Leo had decided to keep living. Leo could never return to a fully wild life. His limp and his age had stripped him of his ability to hunt, but the rescue center provided him with a vast semi-wild area where he could wander freely under the shade of ancient acacia trees. Leo now assumed a new role, an ambassador of nature. Students and tourists who visited the center would fall silent at the sight of him. They didn't see a frail lion. They saw a witness to history, a living symbol of resilience over adversity. Elias leaned back against his familiar jeep, watching Leo resting on a high rocky outcrop, his mane grown thick again and glowing under the golden sun. Elias realized that on that fateful rescue night, he hadn't just saved a lion and Apos' life. He had saved a part of his own soul, the belief that kindness can triumph over the cruelty of natural law. The world can be cold, but as long as humans are willing to reach out to the fallen, hope will always exist. The story ends with the image of Leo standing as the sun begins to set behind the western hills. He takes a deep breath, his chest heaving, and lets out a thunderous roar. That sound no longer carries the anger or the challenge of a ruler. It is the roar of a survivor, a reminder that every breath is a precious gift. If Leo's story has touched your heart, remember that there are many fallen kings around us, whether in nature or in our own communities, who just need a second chance to shine again. Please join us in protecting the beauty of the wild. If you believe in second chances, like this video and subscribe to our channel to continue these journeys of humanity. Thank you for being a part of Leo's legacy.